Just having a wee coffee. Nice old 5-bar gate, that's it. Just lying here, it'll just become part of the ground again one day when it breaks down. Just talking to the farmer, landowner. Nice fella. They obviously look at you with suspicious eyes initially, because they're so used to people abusing the land and the privilege of the land and the fact that they're the caretakers of the land and they maintain it, and you know, they've got a right to ask people what they're doing and stuff, but I'm always pretty forthright and pretty upfront. I just, once they kind of know that you're a lover of the land, then there's never an issue. I was watching a hare in the field there, and it's funny, when a hare gets alarmed, it knows the terrain so well that it knows the runs, it knows the gap in the fence, it knows the height of the fence, it knows where it can juke through the gap in a stone dike. It just knows the land. That's why the hare's so successful at evading capture, because it knows what's coming. It knows what way the dog's going to turn. It knows that if it goes over the brow of a hill, it can lose the dog or whatever's pursuing it in the dead ground, be it a fox. It can lose it here, it can lose it there. It knows where the rashes are. And it's the same in every walk of life. Because if you know the terrain, the chances of you handling and managing the terrain and being successful are so much higher. So the lesson is the same regardless of what it is, you know, man or beast. The lesson's the same. Know the terrain. I'm walking here on this beautiful area, and it's a real joy to be here. It's a beautiful, beautiful little spot. What I always like, right, is when you come into a woodland and you don't see any vandalism on the trees. There's nothing carved on the trees. There's no real sign on the trees that anyone's ever really butchered them. That's great to see. And when you look down in these little waterways and stuff, you don't see any litter. That's also great to see. I like that. I like part of that. There's nothing here at all that's got any sign that people regularly or recently have been here. And yet here we are, right next to a manufactured grazing field for cattle, you know, which is effectively a man-made field, because the land wouldn't have naturally been that shape or that contour or that flat or have no rocks in it. The farmer, through many years of toil, has de-stoned that field and shaped it and nurtured it and, you know, created what we see today. And these guys are the caretakers, they are the custodians of the land, and that's why they're to be respected. They are to be respected because they know the land, and the majority of them are good people and they know what's good for the land, and people in cities don't, and that's a fact. Whether people in cities like to hear that or not, that is a fact. And that is the way of the land, it's the way of the countryside. And people like myself who have spent their entire lives in the countryside learning about woodland and nature and flora and fauna, then we get to know it. So because there's no humans here, what I do notice is I notice a thing called runs. Now you'll see a line there, a faint line, that's animals. Highly likely that it's roe deer. And because of the height of roe deer, you can sometimes look and say, right, I'll look underneath here and see underneath these bushes here. What you'll normally find is some fur, little bits of fur off the head or the brow of the roe deer. And that confirms to me what it is making these tracks. If it was brock, which is a badger, or fox or something else, it would be a particular width, and it would be a particular kind of run. You would see more dirt on it, soil, coloration of the moss and the grass. But the deer are super light on their feet, and they leave very little impression in the ground. Also in this area are hand-reared pheasant, possibly for a commercial pheasant shoot, because these blue barrels turned on stands with little hoppers in the bottom are actually feeders. They're grain feeders, and that one's been fell over for a while, so this woodland's probably no longer used, but at one point pheasants were fed here. There's the lid. That hopper's been like that for a long time, so that tells you that, you know, it has been a while since. But yeah, it's a beautiful area. I'm dry here, and down there, out in that field, in the corner, you may see a speck. That's a brown hare sitting up on its hoofs. It's about, say, about 300 metres away. Yeah, it's about that anyway. It's a nice mature hare just sitting there among the cattle. They'll be its eyes and ears as it will be theirs. If they spook, he'll know, because they're so used to being here that they'll set the alarm off for him. And in turn, if he spooks, they'll have a nosy as well. You know, livestock and dairy cattle and stuff like that, they're not so on edge as wild animals because they're used to dealing with a farmer and collies and people coming and going. But that hare's up in his hoofs, and he's probably seen me, believe it or not. Even though I'm here and my movements are slow and I'm in the dark, he's probably seen me, because that's what hares do. They've got great eyesight, as have I. Me and the hares have got a lot in common. We're both solitary creatures. Beautiful wee holly bush there to my right. I'll bet you all sorts of birds roost in that. This is a little natural kind of ditch, irrigation ditch here, runs down, it's lovely. Comes down through the woodland, and then it runs out where it is the food source and the water source for the animals. Lambs under the tree, the farmhouse is over there. All beautiful. Stock look happy, they're well catered for. The lambs are well at themselves, the grass is good. It's all happening. It's all happening. And it's wet, but I'm in this little kind of deciduous woodland. There's beech, there's birch, there is cedar, some spruce. And I'm just having a wee gander, a wee mosey. There's all sorts in it. It's nice that there's not really any litter at all, which is lovely to see. The moss is, you know, really thick blanket, kind of carpet moss. Be a great woodland. You'll get all sorts of wood pigeon and stuff roosting in here. Deer love woodland like this because there's an abundance of food. And the beech mast seeds fall on the deck, so the wood pigeon and the squirrel love that. That's a treasure trove of food. But aye, it's a beautiful wee woodland. It's really nice. And it's got a lovely view. This is a little kind of natural kind of pathway. It's the boundary of the woodland onto the ditch. And maybe the ditch was dug by a farmer 100 years ago. And it now looks supernatural, as if it was always meant to be there. But you need to remember, there's no straight lines in nature. When these trees were planted by a farmer 5 generations ago or whatever, they're planted in a straight line because it was the boundary of his land. And you know, the problem with beech is it's very shallow rooted, so they fall over in the big winds, and it's always a shame when they go over because they're gone forever then. But you'll always know that woodland on, you know, farmed land is always planted in lines, boundary lines and all the rest of it. Or you'll see a tree in the centre of a field just sitting itself. That's for shade and shelter. It's a lovely wee woodland. I'd say those silver birch are probably 25 to 30 years old, maybe slightly more. But the boundary trees are a couple of 100 years old. Beautiful. You can hear a bumblebee. As I say, guys, I love a walk in the woodland, especially nice woodland that's been looked after. Now, I've got a feeling that farmer I spoke to probably now and again has a wander around these areas and removes any litter, because it's absolutely spotless and that's lovely. I'm actually foraging, I'm looking for wild mushrooms. I did ask if he ever sees any, and he says he wasn't really aware of any, but that doesn't mean to say they're not here, they're just not something that his eyes caught. My eye is attuned differently and will catch them from 50 paces. I'll see them, and I did find some a wee while ago, and last year I did quite well with them. Wild mushrooms are beautiful if you know what to eat, but you can't just go and grab anything or you can have some problems. But if I find any, I'm going to cook them up and stuff and show you what you can and can't eat. I'm in the right kind of place for them. It's not a particularly great time of year, but you do catch them. Although they're usually better at the back end of the year, you do get them kind of year round. Sometimes. Wild garlic, I've found sage, found all sorts of wild stuff. Fruit as well. All sorts, wild potatoes, I find all sorts. As long as you know what you're doing. And with berries, you've always got to be particularly clued up with berries, because berries can be deceiving. What somebody might think of, red currants or elderberries could be something entirely different. But this is a good wee woodland. I'm going to have a proper scout about and see what I come across. It's really lovely to see a place fairly close to civilization, fairly close to a road, but with no litter. That's a bonus. That's always a bonus. For somebody like myself that's very observant, it's great to see natural colours, not dotted with McDonald's wrappers and Coke cans and stuff like that. Never leave any trace. Talking about wood pigeons, there's a wood pigeon's flight feather, so that tells me that they do roost in this woodland, because that's a flight feather. Also droppings in certain areas. Down there was a bit, and it was definitely probably a tawny owl, because they use the same roosts all the time. Very territorial. Beautiful place, really is. I've heard greenfinch, siskins, I've seen a redpoll. What else did I see? Grey wagtails. I've seen a kingfisher the other day. And yep, got an ancient piece of agricultural equipment here. A roller. Ancient bit of kit. Probably with a wee spray and a grease up. It probably still works, believe it or not, and it might be used every couple of years, but it's parked up here, out of sight, out of mind. Unlikely that the scrap guys are going to steal that. It probably weighs 300 kilos. Anyway, so just a wee mosey in the woodland. Beautiful little place for a camp, for a wild camp. And as always, leave it as you find it, and you'll never have a problem with a landowner. And if they come by and they're looking at you a particular way, just explain to them who you are and what you're doing, and just say you mean no harm, and you'll leave it as you find it, and most of them will go on their way. It's only through bad experience will a landowner ever really pursue you and chase you. Is there some fungus in here? Nah, it's not. It's just, there's a little bit, but it's not what I'm after. Far from it. It's poisonous stuff. I'll do a little video on some edibles and what you can eat and what you can't eat. But you got to be careful. I'm not even going to show stuff until I've got both in front of me, because there's a lot of stuff that people think looks like the edible version, and it's definitely not. It's definitely not. So, hedging a side of caution if you're ever foraging. I wouldn't say Scotland was great for foraging. Some of the woodlands are in certain parts of the country, but it is a cold climate and it's not ideal. East Coast being a lot milder. And you need to know the type of woodland as well. There's no point going into a conifer plantation looking for mushrooms. You're not going to find it. They only grow in specific types of woodland. Real old, natural, damp, shady. It's got to be alright, it's got to tick all the boxes, or you're wasting your time and you're effectively onto plums. Anyway guys, I'll keep hunting. Ciao for now.